I hope we can all imagine that we have just finished our dinner. Some of you may have gotten your dessert late. Some of you may not have gotten your dessert at all yet. When I came to California, my girlfriend asked me what was my ambition in life, my life's ambition. Being 28 years old and having just retired, to follow her out to California, I had to think of something. And I said I would like to be a sought-after after-dinner speaker. For the next couple of years, I remember she gave me a lot of grief and ridicule over my answer. Mark Twain came to the Nevada territory when the Civil War caused the traffic on the Mississippi to be cut drastically, and he could no longer work as a riverboat pilot. He tried working as a miner in the silver boom in Nevada, which didn't work at all for him. He then came down through the California gold country to Sacramento, the capital of California, and to San Francisco, the seacoast port. He worked as a reporter here in San Francisco for a newspaper, the Sacramento Union. In 1866, after visiting Hawaii, he returned to San Francisco to find his letters from the islands, which were then known as the Sandwich Islands. Had made him famous enough that he could earn some money by lecturing on the Sandwich Islands, as they were then called. His style was far from professional, but it seemed to suit his audience. One contemporary critic said his method as a lecturer was distinct and novel. His slow, deliberate drawl, the anxious and perturbed look on his face, the apparent painful effort he made to frame his sentences. I can do this. Another critic said he spoke at the rate of about 3 words per minute. In preparing to give this speech, I came across an article in Forbes magazine urging you to take up a career as a professional speaker. It spoke that 95% of professional speakers make less than $20,000 a speech. It said there was a sweet spot at about $6,000 a speech. It described one path that you can take to develop your career was to register with a speaking bureau. If you search online for speaking bureaus, you'll find many. You may find it profitable to register with 3 or 4 of them. It has been said that they won't call you unless you don't need them. When Mark Twain gave his speeches, he spoke with numerous digressions, so that you would begin to wonder if he was ever going to get to the topic. When he spoke of the Sandwich Islanders, he would have failed my anthropology classes. But he had some things right. 90 years before he first spoke of them, the Sandwich Islands were discovered by Captain Cook who named them after his sponsor, the 4th Earl of Sandwich. At that time, the population of the island was 400,000 people. 40 or 50 years later, it had dropped to 200,000 people, mostly because of the missionaries and other trappings of civilization, and particularly the European diseases. At the time he spoke, in 1866, 90 years after the islands were discovered, the population had dropped to 50,000 people. He predicted that they would soon disappear. He said of the women of the native islanders that they rode a horse like a man. And he proposed that we should take a lesson from them, as side saddles were exceedingly dangerous. Two years later, in 1868, he returned to San Francisco. This time, he was prepared to speak on the Holy Lands. And he spoke through the same California venues: San Francisco, Sacramento, Angels Camp, the Nevada Territories, Virginia City, and Carson City. And the next year, he moved on to the eastern states, giving the same sort of lectures with the same sort of success. Most sources name a bunch of eastern states, but this is the West Coast. Then there were a number of speaking terms every 5 to 10 years. In the middle of them, he wrote his best books, Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. You probably have your own favorites. And nobody knows how much he really wrote, because a lot of it was for newspapers that have gone out of existence. I found in my research a professional speaker who had 7 rules for after-dinner speeches. I will share one of them with you. Entertain your audience, not yourself. Mark Twain did not flaunt this, he flouted it. These 2 words are not part of my working vocabulary, so I will explain that to flaunt something is to exhibit it shamelessly. Flouting, which Mark Twain did, was to show contempt for it. He often would apologize for his speakers, for what he was telling his audience. His excuse would be something like that he needed the money. Mark Twain lived a long life. He lived in 1910 at the age of 74. We know him better as an author. His contemporaries knew him at least as well as a speaker. There is some footage of Mark Twain taken by his friend Thomas Edison. There is no sound. Alas, the machines for recording sound have not been invented yet. I was inspired by Hal Holbrook, who I saw in college giving his talk, Mark Twain Tonight, a one-man play where he imitates Mark Twain. And you can see a lot of Hal Holbrook on YouTube. There are other imitators. They are available as MP3 recordings. They are also instructive. Mark Twain described, we have only the transcripts of his speeches. And Mark Twain described the relationship of the speech to its transcript as similar to that between a person and a corpse. Mr. Toastmaster.